The house stood quietly on a peaceful suburban street, its freshly renovated exterior blending seamlessly into the tranquil neighborhood. Warm light spilled from the windows, promising comfort, yet something about it felt off. The walkway leading to the door had an odd, slightly raised patch of cement, a subtle but undeniable imperfection. The faint hum of distant crickets filled the evening air, and mist began to creep in, wrapping the neighborhood in an eerie embrace. It was the perfect starter home for a young family, full of promise, but beneath its polished surface the house held secrets waiting to be unearthed. The basement was cold and damp, a stark contrast to the warmth of the house above. Dim light from a flickering bulb cast long, distorted shadows on the cracked cement walls. In the corner, an old wooden door stood defiantly, its surface weathered and scarred. Thick, rusty nails sealed it shut, as if trapping something on the other side. The air was heavy, carrying a faint, musty scent of decay. The silence was unsettling, broken only by the low hum of the dehumidifier. Though the door no longer led to the outside, its presence loomed, as though it had stories to tell. The attic bedroom was cozy, a child's perfect sanctuary beneath slanted ceilings and wooden beams. A soft amber glow from the battery-powered nightlight bathed the room, pushing back the dark corners. The boy lay peacefully under a colorful blanket, his small frame rising and falling with each breath. Beside him, two cats rested, their ears occasionally twitching as if listening to something unseen. The night was quiet, save for the faint creaks of the house settling. Shadows stretched along the walls, moving gently with the light's flicker. Yet, an inexplicable unease lingered, as though the room wasn't entirely his alone. The basement felt colder that night, the air damp and heavy. The man crouched near the sink, pouring water from the dehumidifier with practiced ease. The faint hum of the machine filled the silence, its steady rhythm oddly comforting. Then, without warning, the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into thick darkness. The dehumidifier's hum continued, a stark reminder that the power wasn't out. He fumbled for his phone, its flashlight cutting through the shadows to reveal the wet floor and crumbling walls. As he climbed the stairs, the light bulbs flickered back on, their glow feeling more menacing than welcoming. The living room was warm and inviting, lit by the soft glow of a table lamp. The couple sat together, engrossed in their card game, their laughter breaking the quiet of the evening. Then, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of footsteps above, slow and deliberate, creaking along the old wooden floor. They froze, exchanging wary glances. The woman called out, her voice cutting through the stillness, but no reply came. Moments later, the footsteps resumed, heavier this time. Annoyance turned to unease as she stormed upstairs, only to find empty halls and her son fast asleep, the house unnervingly silent once more. The narrow staircase stretched downward, shrouded in shadows despite the faint glow of the nightlight above. The woman descended carefully, her young son following close behind, clutching his stomach in discomfort. The air felt dense, unnaturally heavy. Without warning, a force struck her calves, a sharp, deliberate push. She gasped, losing her balance, tumbling down the steep steps. Her body hit the floor with a thud, the sound echoing through the silent house. Dazed and bruised, she looked back up, her son frozen at the top of the stairs, wide-eyed with fear. The staircase now still seemed to pulse with unseen malice. The house was shrouded in an unnatural chill, its windows thrown open to the cold night air. Smoke from the smudging stick curled and swirled unnaturally as the woman moved through the dimly lit rooms, her face set with determination. Candles flickered in every corner, their flames stretching and bending as if straining against the darkness. The sage crackled softly, its scent filling the air, but the oppressive weight of the unseen presence lingered. Shadows on the walls twisted unnervingly, shifting as if alive. Her voice broke the silence, commanding the entity to leave, yet the house itself seemed to hold its breath. Morning light streamed through the kitchen window, painting soft golden patterns on the wooden table. The woman sat silently, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands, her weary eyes staring into the distance. Bruises marked her arms and back, vivid reminders of the night before. The house was quiet, almost too quiet as if it were holding its breath. The faint sound of birds chirping outside felt hollow against the heavy stillness within. Her son played quietly in the next room, his laughter absent. Despite the peaceful scene, an invisible tension hung in the air, as though the house was watching. The basement was cloaked in an uneasy twilight, the single overhead bulb casting dim, sputtering light. The wooden door that had once been nailed shut now stood slightly ajar, its edges splintered, the rusted nails scattered on the damp floor. The air was thick, carrying a faint metallic tang and an unnatural chill. The camera lingered on the dark gap beyond the door, where faint whispers, indistinct but chilling, echoed softly, like a voice speaking from a great distance. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally, reaching toward the viewer. As the whispers grew louder, the screen faded to black, leaving only silence. It was October when I moved into the new house. I'd been waiting for this moment. My own room, a fresh start. The room felt cozy enough, with sunlight spilling through the window and boxes scattered across the floor. But as I unpacked, there was this feeling, a stillness, almost like the house was watching me. I brushed it off. New places can feel strange at first, right? But deep down, I couldn't shake the unease. The shadows seemed just a bit too long, the quiet just a bit too heavy. I had no idea the horrors waiting for me. That first night I kept my bedroom light on. I always do. The dark has a way of making things feel alive. I was trying to fall asleep when I heard it, a faint tapping. At first, I thought I imagined it, but then it got louder, sharper, like long nails scratching against the wall above my bed. My chest tightened and I didn't dare move. The sound crept into my ears, rhythmic and deliberate, as if something was reaching for me, and then, just like that, it stopped. But the silence that followed felt worse, like the house itself was holding its breath. Another night I woke up needing to use the bathroom. The house was deathly quiet, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. I opened my bedroom door, and the hallway stretched before me, dim and endless. That's when I saw it. Near my brother's and stepbrother's room stood a figure, black and shapeless, hunched over like a shadow with weight. It wasn't human, it couldn't be. Its edges rippled as if made of smoke, yet it felt solid, rooted in the darkness. My heart stopped. I slammed the door and locked it, trembling. I didn't leave until morning. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, still shaken by what I'd seen. My heart raced as I decided to tell my brother and stepbrother. I started slowly, trying to find the right words to explain the shadowy figure standing in the hallway. My brother gave me a confused look, but my stepbrother froze mid-bite. His face turned pale and I could see the unease in his eyes. He stared at me for a moment, then quietly said, "I saw it too." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. He described the same thing, a black slouched figure standing near our rooms, its shape blurry and unnatural, like a shadow trying to take form. We both sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. If we'd both seen it, it wasn't just a dream or my imagination. The room felt heavier, the shadows in the corners darker. Couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, listening. Whatever it wasn't gone. And the worst part? I didn't know if it would come back or if it had ever really left. I just knew it was real. There's always a strange unease when settling into a new home, but at first it was just minor annoyances. Keys vanishing, a remote misplaced. Nothing out of the ordinary, or so it seemed. The house felt quiet, too quiet, as though it were holding its breath. Then the oddities grew. Objects reappeared in places they were never left, as if something unseen had been moving them. Every shadow seemed darker, every creak louder, every moment heavier. The sense of being watched crept in, though no one was there. Little did they know the house was only beginning to reveal its secrets. That night, the silence felt suffocating. The faint glow of the TV flickered across the darkened living room, its sound a weak distraction from the growing unease. Then, from the corner of their eye, it appeared. A shadow, a figure, just barely out of focus. They froze, their breath catching in their throat before turning their head sharply toward it. But when they looked, nothing was there. Just an empty corner, still and quiet. They told themselves it was their imagination, a trick of the light. But deep down, they knew. Something was watching, hiding, just beyond their reach. The kitchen was supposed to be a place of comfort, a bright contrast to the unsettling darkness of the rest of the house. But that night, even the warm light of the room couldn't chase away the growing sense of dread. They stood at the sink, plate in hand, turning the faucet. Nothing, no water. The frustration was a welcome distraction from the creeping unease, until it happened. The plates on the counter began to tremble, subtly at first, like a vibration too faint to notice. Then, without warning, the shaking grew violent. One plate slid to the edge and crashed to the floor, shattering into jagged shards. They stepped back, narrowly avoiding a shard that skidded across the tile, its sharp edge grazing their foot. Their heart pounded as the remaining plates rattled, a deafening noise in the stillness. The air felt wrong, thick, oppressive, alive. Their hands trembled as they backed away, eyes darting toward every shadow in the room. A feeling gripped them, a certainty that they were not alone. Something unseen, something malicious was in that kitchen with them. They didn't need any more proof. They turned and ran, but the terror followed close behind. The hallway felt endless as they sprinted toward the front door, their chests tight with fear. Each step echoed unnaturally, the sound stretching and twisting like the house itself was mocking their desperation. Their fingers fumbled with the lock, trembling as if the very air around them was seeping into their bones. Just as they reached for the doorknob, it happened a sound. A deep, guttural scrape sent shivers down their spine. They turned, and their heart dropped. 3 long, jagged scratches began to carve themselves into the wood of the door, as if an invisible hand was dragging sharp claws across it. The sound was deafening, like nails on a chalkboard amplified to an unbearable degree. The scratches seemed alive, glowing faintly red in the dim light, pulsing with a sinister rhythm. The walls around the door began to shift, faint marks appearing and disappearing, like something was clawing its way out. They stared in frozen terror, unable to move, until a loud bang from behind snapped them out of their trance. Adrenaline took over. They flung the door open and ran into the night, but the feeling of being hunted clung to them, an invisible weight pressing down with every step. The night was thick with fog, the kind that clung to everything and swallowed sound. They stumbled to their car, hands shaking as they fumbled with the keys. Every nerve in their body screamed to move faster, to escape whatever was behind them. Finally, the engine roared to life and the headlights pierced the suffocating darkness. They slammed the gas pedal, tires screeching against the driveway. The house loomed in the rear-view mirror, a shadowed silhouette against the fog. Relief was fleeting, though. A chill crept up their spine. Something wasn't right. Then they saw it. The headlights illuminated a figure standing motionless in the middle of the driveway. Pale and faceless, it had no eyes, yet it stared directly into their soul. Its presence was wrong, like a void where a person should be. Panic surged as they yanked the wheel to the left, tires skidding on the wet pavement. The car careened off the road, smashing into something unseen. The impact hit like a punch, throwing them forward as the world spun into chaos. Darkness closed in, but just before everything went black, they felt it. A cold, suffocating presence, closer now than ever before. The first thing they noticed was the sterile scent of disinfectant. Their head throbbed as they opened their eyes, the fluorescent lights of the hospital room glaring down at them. For a moment, they felt a flicker of relief. They had escaped. The car crash, the house, the thing. It was all behind them now, or so they thought. The room was quiet, unnervingly so. Only the faint beeping of the heart monitor broke the silence. They shifted slightly, wincing at the pain that rippled through their body. Bandages covered their arms and forehead, but it wasn't the injuries that concerned them. It was the feeling, the same suffocating heaviness from the house. It was here. Their eyes drifted to the wall opposite their bed. At first it looked normal, plain, harmless, but then they saw it. Faint scratches began to appear, as if an unseen hand were carving them into the sterile white surface. 1, 2, 3. The sound was subtle at first, a soft scratching noise, but it grew louder, sharper, more insistent. The shadows in the corners of the room deepened, stretching unnaturally toward the bed. Panic set in as their eyes darted around the room. And then they saw it. At the foot of the bed, standing impossibly still, was the faceless figure. Its presence was overwhelming, its pale, featureless face reflecting the cold light of the room. They tried to scream, to move, but their body wouldn't obey. The figure tilted its head slightly as if studying them, before the lights flickered and the room plunged into darkness. The last thing they heard was the sound of claws scraping closer and closer. They realized with horrifying clarity that there was no escaping it. It had followed them, and it wasn't leaving this time.